The dead don't stay quiet in places like this. Grace Ashcroft felt it the moment her boots touched the cracked asphalt outside the Heroic Hotel, a condemned slab of rotting concrete squatting alone on the edge of a forgotten Midwestern highway. The air smelled wrong. Not decay exactly. Something older. Like dust trapped in lungs that never learned how to die. 8 years. 8 years since her mother bled out on the carpet of room 217. Grace stood still, FBI badge heavy against her chest, the chain cold like it had been waiting for her. The hotel loomed above, windows blacked out, some boarded, some shattered, empty eyes staring back at her. She had reviewed the photos 100 times. Crime scene stills. Autopsy reports. Redacted interviews. None of them captured the feeling crawling up her spine now. This place remembered her. "Get it together," she muttered, voice swallowed by the wind. Officially, she was here because 3 people had died in the last month, urban explorers, thrill seekers, YouTubers chasing haunted clicks. All found inside the hotel. All with no visible wounds. All with faces locked in expressions of terror so extreme the coroner described it as neurological shock induced by prolonged fear. Unofficially, Grace was here because the nightmares had started again. She adjusted her flashlight and stepped toward the entrance. The revolving door was frozen mid-turn, glass shattered, dried blood smeared across one panel like someone had tried to escape and failed. Grace didn't touch it. She ducked through a side door instead, its hinges screaming as if warning her to turn back. The lobby exhaled. Dust swirled in her light beam, thick and slow, like it didn't want to move. The chandelier overhead hung crooked, its crystals missing, wires exposed like veins ripped out of a chest. The front desk was overturned. Behind it, the wall was stained dark brown, blood old enough to fade but never enough to disappear. Her pulse thudded in her ears. This is where. She ran, Grace thought. This is where she screamed. Alyssa Ashcroft. Investigative journalist. Survivor of Raccoon City. One of the few who escaped the outbreak with her sanity intact, or so everyone believed. Her murder here had been labeled a cold case, but Grace knew better. The files were wrong. Incomplete. Sanitized. Someone had cleaned the truth. Grace raised her flashlight and froze. Footprints. Fresh. They led deeper into the hotel, toward the staircase. Not boot prints, bare feet. Long toes. Drag marks like whoever walked here hadn't fully lifted their heels. Her FBI training screamed at her to call for backup. Her blood screamed louder. The staircase groaned under her weight. Each step echoed too long, as if the sound didn't know where to stop. On the second floor, the hallway stretched ahead, wallpaper peeling like shedding skin. Doors lined both sides, numbers crooked or missing. Room 217 waited at the end. Grace's breathing turned shallow. As she moved, the temperature dropped. Her breath fogged. The light flickered, not electrical failure, but something worse. Like the dark was pushing back. She passed room 204. Something whispered her name. She spun, gun raised. Nothing. Just a door slowly creaking open. Grace approached, heart hammering. Inside, the room was stripped bare, no furniture, no carpet. Only symbols carved into the walls. Circles. Arrows. A spiral that twisted inward again and again, scratched so deep the plaster had broken away. Umbrella wasn't known for rituals. But Victor Gideon was never known for following rules. Grace swallowed. Gideon, former Umbrella biochemist, declared dead after Raccoon City. Recently reappeared in classified FBI intercepts tied to black market research into trauma-induced mutagenesis. Fear as fuel. She backed out of the room and continued down the hall. Room 217. The door stood ajar. Inside, the air smelled metallic, blood memory. The carpet had been replaced, but the stain remained, faint yet unmistakable. Grace stepped in, every nerve screaming. Her flashlight landed on the bathroom mirror. Written across it in dried, brownish streaks was a single word. Requiem. Her reflection shifted. For half a second, she wasn't alone. A woman stood behind her, hair matted with blood, eyes wide with terror, mouth open mid-scream. Alyssa. Grace whirled around. Empty. The mirror cracked. From the hallway came the sound of wet footsteps. Slow. Patient. Then a voice. Raspy, distorted, layered like several mouths speaking at once. She died knowing the truth. Grace raised her gun, hands shaking. Who's there? The footsteps stopped. The lights went out. In the pitch-black silence, something breathed right next to her ear. And now, the voice whispered, so will you. Grace Ashcroft did not scream. She couldn't. The darkness crushed the sound out of her chest, pressed it back down into her lungs until breathing itself felt like an act of defiance. The hotel had gone completely black, no moonlight, no emergency glow, no distant street lamps bleeding through the windows. It was as if Heroic had sealed itself shut, swallowing her whole. Something shifted behind her. She felt it before she heard it. A displacement in the air. A wrongness that scraped along her spine. Grace stepped backward, boot catching on the carpet, and nearly fell. Her flashlight clattered to the floor, rolling uselessly, its beam slicing wildly across the walls before dying altogether. Silence followed. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of something listening. Her heart pounded so violently she was sure it would give her away. Each beat echoed in her skull, slow and distorted, like it didn't belong to her anymore. FBI, she said, voice trembling despite herself. Show yourself. No answer. Instead, the smell returned. Copper. Rot. Old disinfectant layered over something biological and wrong. Then the hallway lights flickered on. Grace blinked, vision swimming. She was no longer standing in room 217. She stood in the hallway again, but it wasn't decayed now. The wallpaper was clean. The lights bright. The carpet a deep red, plush beneath her feet. The hotel was alive. Her stomach dropped. No, she whispered. Footsteps echoed behind her. Normal footsteps. Human. Grace. She turned slowly. Her mother stood at the far end of the hall. Alyssa Ashcroft looked exactly as she had 8 years ago, brown jacket, press badge clipped at her hip, hair pulled back hastily like she'd been working all night. No blood. No wounds. Alive. Grace's knees buckled. Mom. Alyssa smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. You shouldn't be here, she said gently. I told you that. Tears blurred Grace's vision. Her mind screamed that this wasn't real, that trauma rewired perception, that fear hallucinations were common in high-stress environments. But her heart didn't care. I tried to stop you, Grace choked. I begged you not to come here. Alyssa stepped closer. Each footstep echoed louder than it should have. And you still followed me, she replied. Just like now. The hallway lights flickered again. Alyssa's face twitched. For a fraction of a second, her skin darkened, veins surfacing, eyes clouding white. Then she was normal again. Grace backed away. This isn't real, she said aloud, more for herself than anything else. Alyssa tilted her head. Isn't it? She asked. You've been seeing things for weeks. The files changing. Voices on dead phone lines. You really think this hotel started it? The walls began to pulse. Breathing. Grace clutched her head as memories crashed into her, Raccoon City headlines, umbrella logos stamped over censored documents, her mother whispering over encrypted calls late at night. They didn't destroy it all, Gracie. Some of it survived. The carpet beneath her feet turned slick. She looked down. Blood soaked through the fibers, spreading outward like a living thing. Her boots were submerged now. Sticky. Warm. Alyssa's voice deepened. Victor Gideon understood fear, she said. He understood what Umbrella never admitted: terror doesn't just break people. A wet sound followed her words. The walls peeled open. Inside them were faces. Human faces. Stretched, frozen mid-scream, eyes moving, mouths opening and closing without sound. They were embedded in the structure itself, fused into plaster and wiring and bone. Grace screamed then. Alyssa stepped closer, her shadow splitting into several overlapping shapes. He learned how to make fear change people, Alyssa continued. How to turn memory into infection. Her jaw cracked unnaturally as she smiled wider. And I found proof. The hallway collapsed inward. Grace was falling. Downward, sideways, through years of her own nightmares. She hit the floor hard. Breath knocked from her lungs. The hotel snapped back to decay. She lay in room 217 again. Cold. Dark. Alone. Or so she thought. Her radio crackled. Static, then a voice she didn't recognize. Agent Ashcroft, the voice said calmly. If you're hearing this, you're already inside Phase 1. Grace crawled backward, heart racing. Who is this? A pause. Then, my name is Victor Gideon. The air vibrated. You inherited your mother's instincts, he continued. But also her weakness. Something moved in the bathroom. Slow. Dragging. Grace forced herself upright, gun shaking in her grip. What do you want? Gideon's voice softened. To finish what began in 1998, he said. And to see if grief makes you stronger, or if it breaks you like it did her. The bathroom door creaked open. A shape emerged, tall, wrong, its body twitching as if pulled by invisible strings. Its face was a blur of overlapping expressions, fear, rage, agony, cycling too fast to focus on. Grace fired. The bullet passed straight through it. The thing smiled. And spoke in her mother's voice. You should have stayed away. Leon S. Kennedy had learned long ago that the worst places were never loud. They were quiet. The underground facility beneath the abandoned Gideon Research Annex was silent in a way that pressed against the ears, like the absence of sound was intentional. Emergency lights bathed the concrete corridors in a sickly red glow, shadows stretching too long, too thin, like they were reaching. Leon moved forward with practiced precision, gun raised, breathing slow. The man who'd survived Raccoon City, Spain, bioterror cults, and nightmares that never really ended did not scare easily. But this place made his instincts itch. The facility had been erased from public record in 2003, one of dozens umbrella burned to the ground on paper. But paper lied. Concrete didn't. Leon stopped beside a reinforced door. The sign above it was half melted, but still readable. Neuroresonance testing. He exhaled through his nose. Of course, he muttered. The door was unlocked. Inside, the lab smelled sterile and rotten at the same time. Rows of gurneys lined the walls, restraints dangling loose. Old 4 bags hung like deflated organs. On one table, a body lay uncovered. Leon approached cautiously. The corpse was male. Mid-30s. Civilian. No visible trauma. No injection marks. No surgical incisions. But the face. The man's eyes were wide open, pupils blown so far they swallowed the irises entirely. Blood had leaked from the tear ducts, dried into black streaks down his cheeks. His mouth was stretched into a silent scream so intense the skin around it had split. Leon had seen this before. Not exactly, but close enough. Extreme adrenal overload, Leon murmured. Brain cooked itself. He turned to the monitors behind the gurney. They flickered to life. Video logs began to play automatically. A man stepped into frame, thin, well-dressed, hair neatly combed. His eyes were calm. Curious. Almost kind. Victor Gideon. Umbrella made monsters by force, Gideon said pleasantly. Viruses. Parasites. Physical domination. The footage cut to subjects strapped to chairs, electrodes lining their skulls. I make monsters by invitation. The feed jumped. A woman screamed as the room around her distorted, walls warping, shadows crawling, her own hands stretching and bending like rubber. Her vitals spiked violently. Gideon's voice continued, layered over the footage. Fear opens doors the body keeps locked. Trauma weakens the membrane between perception and reality. The woman's screams became wet. Her chest convulsed. Something inside her moved. Leon felt his jaw tighten. The video froze. The next frame showed her hours later. She was no longer human. Her body had elongated unnaturally, limbs jointed wrong, skin translucent enough to reveal pulsing organs beneath. Her face had split down the middle, jaw unhinged, teeth growing inward like a trap. Subject expired, neural collapse. Leon shut the monitor off. Jesus, he whispered. A noise echoed down the corridor. Not footsteps. Dragging. Leon pivoted, gun raised. From the shadows came a figure, once human, now bent forward at an impossible angle. Its spine protruded through torn skin, vertebrae clicking as it moved. Its arms were elongated, fingers fused into claw-like shapes, nails blackened and cracked. Its head snapped toward Leon. Its face twitched rapidly, expressions flickering, terror, confusion, rage, cycling like broken film. It spoke. Don't let it see you. Leon fired. The rounds tore into its torso, but it didn't fall. Instead, it convulsed violently, body changing mid-motion. Muscles retracted, bones shifting, skin tightening like it was being resculpted by panic itself. The creature lunged. Leon barely rolled aside as claws slammed into the floor, cracking concrete. Stay down. Leon shouted, firing again, this time aiming for the head. The bullet struck. The creature froze. Its face relaxed. For a moment, it looked peaceful. Then its skull collapsed inward like wet paper. The body dropped. Leon stood there. Chest heaving. That wasn't viral replication. That was psychological mutation. His communicator crackled. Leon, a voice said. Calm. Female. FBI frequency. Agent Ashcroft? Leon asked. Victor Gideon is alive, Grace said. Her voice trembled beneath forced control. And he's using fear as a catalyst. Leon closed his eyes briefly. Yeah, he said quietly. I figured that out. A pause. Then Grace spoke again, lower. I think the hotel is part of it. Not just a location. A trigger. Leon glanced around the lab, the bodies, the restraints, the screens. Then Gideon didn't build monsters, Leon said. He built places that do it for him. The lights flickered. The dead creature on the floor twitched. Leon raised his gun again. Grace, he said, steady despite the pounding in his skull. Whatever you're seeing, don't trust it. Too late. In the corner of the lab, a shadow detached itself from the wall. And smiled. Grace realized the hotel was breathing when the walls began to sweat. At first she thought it was condensation, cold meeting rot, but when a warm droplet slid down her cheek, thick and sticky, she knew better. The surface of the wallpaper pulsed faintly beneath her palm, rising and falling like a ribcage. Each breath carried a low, almost inaudible groan, as if the building itself were in pain. Or hungry. She staggered into the hallway, boots sticking to the carpet with every step. The once familiar corridor had elongated, stretching farther than it should have, doors bending inward like crooked teeth. The exit sign flickered red, then spelled something else entirely. Stay. Grace wiped blood from her nose. Her head throbbed, thoughts blurring at the edges. She could feel it, something probing her mind, brushing against old wounds, searching for leverage. Get out of my head, she whispered. The hotel answered by opening a door. Room 209. Inside, the air was warm, humid. The room was furnished now, too familiar. A couch she recognized. A coffee table with a chipped corner. Her childhood living room. Grace froze. No, she said, backing away. The television flickered on by itself. Static resolved into footage, grainy, handheld, shaking. Raccoon City. Sirens. Fire. Screaming civilians running as something massive moved through the smoke. She knew this footage. Her mother had hidden it, encrypted, unfinished. Alyssa's voice played over the video. If anyone finds this. Umbrella didn't fail. They learned. They learned fear spreads faster than infection. Grace's knees gave out. The walls peeled back. Behind them were people, embedded like fossils. Some were alive, eyes rolling wildly. Others were half-formed, bodies fused into pipes and wiring, mouths opening and closing in silent pleas. Their faces were twisted into expressions of raw terror, frozen at the exact moment their minds broke. A hand burst free from the wall and grabbed Grace's wrist. She screamed, yanking free. Skin tearing. The hand retreated, leaving behind a wet hole that sealed itself shut, flesh knitting over plaster. The hallway shifted again. Lights dimmed. Something crawled along the ceiling. Grace raised her gun, breath ragged. The thing dropped down in front of her. It had once been human, male, maybe early 20s, but fear had restructured him. His spine curved forward unnaturally, ribs splayed outward like a cage turned inside out. His head was elongated, skull stretched, eyes oversized and glassy. His mouth opened far too wide, jaw unhinging with a sickening pop. He didn't roar. He sobbed. Make it stop, it begged, voice layered with others. Please, don't let it show me again. Grace fired. The bullet struck its chest, and the creature convulsed violently. Instead of dying, its body reacted, muscles tightening, bones shifting, skin thickening. The sobbing turned into laughter. Fear adaptation. It lunged. Grace ran. The hotel chased her. Doors slammed shut ahead of her, while others burst open violently, releasing waves of hallucinations, burning streets, screaming children, umbrella logos melting into flesh. The floor tilted, dumping her into a stairwell that spiraled downward far longer than the building's height should allow. She fell. Hit hard. The air knocked from her lungs as she landed in a wide, open space. The ballroom. Once elegant. Now obscene. The ceiling had collapsed inward, forming a fleshy dome that pulsed rhythmically. Chandeliers hung embedded in tissue, dripping blood instead of crystal. The floor was slick, uneven, made of layered bodies fused together, faces staring up at her, mouths open in endless screams. At the center of the room stood a figure. Victor Gideon. In the flesh. He looked older than the footage, grayer, thinner, but his posture was relaxed. Comfortable. Like this place belonged to him. It's beautiful, isn't it? He said softly. Fear gave it shape. Grace aimed her gun, hands shaking. You killed my mother. Gideon smiled. Sadly. No, he replied. Fear did. I only listened. The floor beneath Grace shifted. Hands grabbed her ankles. She screamed as the fused bodies tried to pull her down, faces changing, becoming her mother's face, over and over, accusing, terrified. You watched her die, the hotel whispered. Grace fired wildly, sobbing, fighting to stay above the surface. I was a kid, she screamed. I didn't know. Gideon stepped closer, unbothered by the grasping dead. And now you do, he said. That's the difference. The ceiling split open. From within it descended something massive, an amalgamation of human forms, fused into a towering shape, limbs tangled, faces screaming from every angle. It moved slowly, deliberately, each step sending tremors through the floor. The requiem requires a conductor, Gideon said calmly. Your mother almost was. You're better suited. Grace felt something unlock inside her mind. Not strength. Acceptance. She looked at the creature, at the hotel, at Gideon. Then her radio crackled. Grace, Leon's voice said urgently. Listen to me. Whatever it shows you, don't let it finish. Grace laughed weakly through tears. It already has, she whispered. The creature leaned down. And the hotel inhaled. Grace didn't know how long she was unconscious. Time inside the heroic hotel didn't move forward, it folded. When she opened her eyes, she was lying on cold tile, her body aching as if she'd been pulled apart and reassembled incorrectly. The ballroom was gone. The creature was gone. So was Victor Gideon. She pushed herself upright, nausea rolling through her. The hotel was quiet now. Too quiet. No breathing walls. No screaming faces. Just long, sterile corridors that reminded her of hospitals. White paint, flickering fluorescence, the hum of hidden machinery. This wasn't the heroic anymore. This was something underneath it. Her radio crackled. Grace, Leon said. His voice was strained, breath heavy, gunfire echoing faintly in the background. I found Gideon's core servers. You need to hear this. Send it, she said hoarsely. Her HUD flickered as data streamed in, audio logs, research files, fragmented footage. Gideon's voice filled her ears. Raccoon City was proof of concept, Gideon said calmly. A city pushed into terror creates patterns. Fear behaves like a signal, broadcast, received, amplified. The footage shifted. Cities. Crowds. Riots. Hospitals overwhelmed. People screaming, not from infection, but from hallucinations. Shadows that weren't there. Voices whispering from walls. Grace's blood ran cold. He isn't making bioweapons, she whispered. He's turning environments into triggers. Leon's voice was grim. He calls them resonance zones. Places where trauma was concentrated. Fear lingers. Builds. Mutates. Grace looked around. The walls here were embedded with cables, old umbrella tech fused with something organic. Veins pulsed faintly beneath the surfaces. The hotel was a test, Grace said. Yes, Leon replied. And it worked. A door slid open ahead of her. Inside was a control room. Screens covered every wall, displaying live feeds from across the country. Abandoned hospitals, closed schools, subway tunnels, disaster memorial sites. Some showed nothing unusual. Others showed people screaming. Changing. On the central screen was a familiar symbol. The umbrella logo. Cracked. Bleeding. Gideon's voice played again. Fear does what viruses cannot, he said. It spreads willingly. Grace stepped forward, horror crystallizing into clarity. He doesn't need outbreaks, she said. He just needs reminders. The screen changed. News footage played, an investigative journalist murdered in a Midwest hotel 8 years ago. Alyssa Ashcroft's face filled the display. Grace staggered back. My mother wasn't collateral, she whispered. She was the first vector. Gideon had chosen the hotel not just because of umbrella ties, but because Alyssa had died there knowing the truth. Her terror, her awareness, her unfinished warning had soaked into the place. A perfect seed. Something shifted behind Grace. She turned. Victor Gideon stood in the doorway. He looked tired now. Pale. His hands trembled slightly, as if even he wasn't immune anymore. You understand, he said softly. She was exceptional. Fear sharpened her mind instead of breaking it. You murdered her, Grace spat. Gideon shook his head. Fear killed her. I only watched. He stepped aside, revealing a massive structure behind him, an organic core embedded in machinery, pulsing rhythmically. Faces were trapped inside it, half-formed, eyes rolling, mouths opening and closing. They're broadcasting, Grace realized. Yes, Gideon said. Fear leaves fingerprints on reality. Once enough people feel the same terror, the signal sustains itself. Grace's radio crackled violently. Grace! Leon shouted. Cities are reporting mass hallucinations. No pathogen. No exposure source. It's happening everywhere. Gideon smiled faintly. The requiem has begun, he said. Grace raised her gun. This ends here. Gideon didn't resist. Kill me if you need to, he said calmly. But it won't stop it. You can't kill an emotion. The core pulsed harder. Grace felt it then, fear rising in her chest, not from the room, but from everyone. Millions of people, connected by shared dread. The weight of it pressed into her skull. The hotel hadn't chosen her by accident. It had tuned her. You don't need me anymore, Gideon said. You need a conductor. The walls trembled. The core reacted to Grace's presence, light intensifying, screams growing louder. Leon's voice broke through the static. Grace, whatever you're thinking, don't. But it was already too late. Grace understood the truth Gideon had hidden. Fear could be redirected. Focused. Controlled. But only by someone who had survived it. She stepped closer to the core. And the world screamed back. Grace Ashcroft stepped into the core. The moment her skin touched it, the world ruptured. Sound vanished first. Then light. Then the idea of direction. Grace felt herself dissolve, not physically, but conceptually, her thoughts stretched thin, pulled outward in 1,000 directions at once. Fear flooded her mind, but it wasn't hers anymore. It was everyone's. She saw through 1,000,000 eyes. A woman alone in a hospital stairwell, convinced something followed her. A man trapped in a stalled subway, shadows moving where they shouldn't. A child staring into a dark bedroom corner, certain something was breathing back. Their fear slammed into Grace like waves. She screamed, but no sound came. The core responded. It unfolded around her, organic matter retracting, reshaping, not consuming her body, but listening to her mind. Tendrils brushed her temples, spine, chest, not piercing skin, but sinking, neurons aligning, memories interfacing. She felt herself becoming a junction. A conductor. No, 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 she thought desperately. I'm not yours. The requiem answered anyway. It showed her the truth Gideon never admitted. Fear wasn't the source. It was the language. And Grace was fluent. She saw her mother again, not as a hallucination this time, but as memory sharpened to a blade. Alyssa Ashcroft kneeling in room 217, recording her final message, hands shaking but eyes clear. "They're not done," Alyssa whispered. "They're learning how to make the world remember." Grace felt something crack open inside her chest. Grief surged, but instead of breaking her, it stabilized her. The core reacted violently. Its rhythm faltered. Across the country, resonance zones spasmed. Creatures mid-mutation froze. Hallucinations stuttered. Fear spiked, then hesitated. Grace realized why Gideon had failed. He studied fear. He never lived with it. She did. Grace focused, not on terror, but on containment. On grounding. On the difference between imagined horror and real survival. She forced her breathing. Slow, even as the screams of thousands clawed at her skull. The core resisted. It tried to show her worse. Raccoon City, burning. Leon bleeding in a hallway. Her own body twisted, bones breaking, face splitting. Grace didn't look away. She accepted the fear, and refused to let it steer. The core screamed. In the physical world, Leon S. Kennedy burst into the chamber just as the machinery began to overload. Alarms blared. Walls cracked. The organic structure convulsed like a dying animal. "Grace!" Leon shouted. She turned toward him. And Leon froze. Grace was still human, but wrong. Veins of faint light traced beneath her skin, pulsing in sync with the core. Her eyes reflected patterns that didn't belong to this dimension, overlapping memories, impossible geometries, fear rendered as data. But she was herself. Barely. "Leon," she said, voice layered, hers, and 1,000 echoes beneath it. "You need to destroy the external nodes. Now." Leon swallowed hard. "And you?" Grace smiled faintly. "I'm holding the door shut." The ceiling split open as something massive tried to push through reality itself, a composite entity formed of collective fear, faces screaming from its surface, limbs folding into each other endlessly. The Requiem's final form. It reached for Grace. She reached back. And closed her hand. The entity screamed, not in pain, but in confusion. Fear without direction collapsed in on itself, folding inward, destabilizing the network. Across the screens, resonance zones went dark one by one. Leon detonated the charges. The chamber began to collapse. "Grace!" Leon shouted, running toward her. "We have to go." Grace shook her head slowly. "If I leave," she said, straining, blood leaking from her nose and eyes, "it follows." Leon stopped. For the first time since Raccoon City, he had no move left. Grace looked at him, really looked. "You did your part," she said softly. "Let me do mine." The core began to crystallize around her, sealing, not consuming, but anchoring her. In place. She felt her body locking into stillness, nerves burning, thoughts stretching thin again. But the fear was quieter now. Contained. "Tell the world," Grace whispered. "Not everything scary is a monster. Some things are warnings." Leon backed away slowly, eyes never leaving her. The chamber collapsed inward. Steel. Concrete. Flesh. Light. Gone. The world did not end. That was the cruelest part. 3 weeks after the collapse beneath the heroic hotel, life continued with unnerving precision. Traffic lights changed on time. News anchors smiled again. Emergency rooms emptied. The words mass hallucination event were quietly replaced with psychogenic episode, then phased out entirely. Fear, they said, had passed. Leon S. Kennedy stood alone on a bluff overlooking the sealed ruins of the hotel. Concrete and steel had been poured until the site resembled a mass grave more than a demolition. No markers. No names. Officially, Grace Ashcroft died in a structural collapse. Unofficially, she never left. Leon could still feel her sometimes, like pressure behind the eyes, like the moment before panic that never quite arrived. Sleep had become different. Safer. And that frightened him more than nightmares ever had. He lit a cigarette. Let it burn without inhaling. They had destroyed every known resonance node. Gideon's research was scrubbed, buried deeper than Umbrella ever was. The world wanted normalcy, and it had learned how to lie to itself beautifully. But Leon knew better. Fear didn't vanish. It adapted. Miles away, in a quiet suburban home, a woman woke abruptly at 3:17 a.m. heart racing. She sat up, listening. Nothing was wrong. No noise. No movement. Still, she felt watched. She reached for her phone. The panic faded. She slept again. In a hospital ICU, a man flatlined, then stabilized inexplicably. Doctors called it a miracle. They never noticed the brief drop in fear responses across the ward, the way the air seemed to settle afterward. Across the country, children reported fewer night terrors. Veterans slept longer. Victims of trauma found the edges of their memories less sharp. Fear was still there. But it was guided. Leon visited Alyssa Ashcroft's grave on a cloudy afternoon. He stood in silence, hat in hand, the weight of unspoken truths pressing down on him. She finished it, he said quietly. What? You started. The wind stirred. For a moment, just a moment, Leon felt warmth. Familiar. Steady. Then it passed. Beneath the earth, far below concrete and steel, Grace Ashcroft remained awake. She no longer had a body in the way humans understood it. No heartbeat. No breath. But she existed, stretched across a network of neural echoes, memories, emotional feedback loops. The requiem had not been destroyed. It had been rewritten. Grace felt fear constantly. Millions of small flickers, sparks threatening to become wildfires. She didn't erase them. That would have been wrong. She redirected them. Fear became warning instead of weapon. Instinct instead of hallucination. A whisper instead of a scream. But something else lingered. A residue. Not all fear was human. In the dark spaces between shared nightmares, Grace sensed movement. Old patterns. Shadows that didn't belong to anyone alive. Things that had fed on terror long before Umbrella learned how to study it. They noticed her. She felt their curiosity brush against her awareness. And for the first time since the collapse, Grace felt afraid. Not of them. Of what came next. Because she understood something now that Gideon never had. Fear was not the enemy. It was the door. And doors worked both ways. Somewhere, deep in an unmarked government archive, a single corrupted file refused to delete itself. A name flickered on screen briefly before vanishing again. Requiem, passive state. A technician frowned, blaming the system lag. He rebooted. The screen went dark. Then, very briefly, text appeared, unprompted. Still listening. Far below, Grace tightened her hold. She did not scream. She did not beg. She waited. Because as long as humans feared the dark, something would always answer. And this time, it would not be alone. End.